Hi, my name is Caitlin Bandy, and this is my channel, Bandy's Books. Today is October 1st, and for me, that's the start of one of my favorite seasons of the year. In order to kind of get in the mood for Halloween, I like to not only decorate my house, pick out a cool costume, and visit haunted houses. I love to read books that are kind of in the horror, gothic, psychological thriller sort of a genre. And I recently visited my local bookshop, the Writer's Block here in Las Vegas, and picked out a whole entire stack to help kind of get me in the mood. Some of these are super popular, some of them are not as popular. Hopefully there will be some new finds here for you. Okay, so the first book on my list is a book that I picked out due to the bright and vibrant colors on the cover. I saw it from across the room because the book is a bright turquoise with bright red spots all over it. It's a really pretty cover, and then when I picked it up and looked at the description on the back, I thought it sounded really interesting. It isn't a book that I have seen anywhere on social media. I don't know anyone that's read it. I have no idea how good it is or anything really about it aside from just the little summary that I've read. But that sounds interesting enough, and the book is called The Butterfly House, and it's by Katrine Enberg. It takes place in Copenhagen, and the story starts when a nurse walks into a hospital patient's room with a lethal dose of coronary medication. A couple days later, a naked woman is found dead on the streets of Copenhagen, and she's been completely exsanguinated. This book kind of features the two detectives that are investigating these cases and figuring out what exactly is going on in the city. The reason that I found this book enticing is because I really enjoy books that are set in countries that are not my own. I love to travel, and with the pandemic, I haven't been able to travel nearly as much as I've wanted to. So I get to escape a little bit in books that feature other countries. I also love a good police mystery just as much as the next person, and I'm kind of excited to see how the investigators figure out, and unravel all the clues of these murders that are occurring in Copenhagen. I am really excited to get started with this. Like I said, it's a really pretty cover. I think that the colors are really catchy, and hopefully it'll turn out to be really good. The second book on my list is a book that's been hyped all over social media. It's on a lot of reading lists for the fall, and it seems to be really polarizing. People either seem to love it or hate it, and I'm really curious to see where I lie on that spectrum. In fact, I'm so curious that upon getting it home, I have already read the first 130 pages of it, and that is The Maidens by Michaelides. This book features a character named Mariana who is recently widowed after the tragic and untimely death of her young husband. She's working as a group therapist dealing with psychological trauma, and her young niece is attending Cambridge, which is also her alma mater. Her young niece Zoe calls her one night, upset because her friend is missing and concerned that something is wrong. Sadly, the next day it turns out that her friend was indeed murdered, and in a kind of a gruesome way. So Mariana heads to Cambridge to console her niece Zoe, and while she's there, she's introduced to the enigmatic Professor Fosca, who teaches Greek tragedies. She's kind of off-put by him. He kind of seems like he's too refined, like he's maybe acting a bit. And then there's this group of cult-like followers who dress in all white and are all females and follow him around campus, and they call themselves the Maidens. This really seems to set Mariana on edge. As she investigates, she kind of starts to suspect him, and then her suspicions lead her down a really dark rabbit hole. And I understand that this book starts to kind of play with the perception of reality. I know that this is also really plot twisty kind of a book, and that's what a lot of people have disliked in it. Some people seem to like where the plot twists go, others seem to dislike it, and that's kind of the point of contention within the story. I'm really looking forward, like I said, to reading it myself. I've probably got another day or two left before I finished it, and then I'll be posting reviews on social media. But yeah, so far it's really good. It's engaging. The chapters are really short, so I've found that it's reading really quickly, and I like where it's going thus far. I hope that the plot twists don't ruin it for me. If you've read this book, let me know in the comments below if you like the plot twists or if you're on team I didn't like them. I'm really curious to see where everybody lies. The third book on my list is another book that I picked up because of the beautiful cover. It's covered in bright colors and it has a lot of Mayan symbols on it. So that immediately drew my attention. That book is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is the same author who wrote Mexican Gothic. This is a couple years older than Mexican Gothic. I haven't seen it around on any list, but I think that's because, like I said, it's a little bit older. The book sounds super, super interesting to me. It's set in 1920s Mexico in the Yucatan Peninsula, and the main character, Cassiopeia, is at her grandfather's home and opens up a box that she had been forbidden to open, and out pops the Mayan deity of death, Huncame. Huncame and Cassiopeia go on a journey across Mexico to find Huncame's missing body parts and figure out what happened to him, how his body ended up spread out across Mexico. This story does journey through several different states of Mexico and is great for anybody that might be interested in kind of traveling vicariously through the book. For me, Mexico is one of my favorite countries, so I'm always super excited about any book that takes place there, and especially in this case where it deals with a lot of Mayan culture, and we get to see a lot of different parts of Mexico. Since we're all kind of stuck not traveling as much as we'd like to right now, this is a good chance to kind of escape reality for a bit. Book number 4 on my list is so popular right now. 10 books you have to read before you die. Instagram, YouTube, Book Talk, Pinterest, you name it, it's there. And when a book is popular across that many demographics, by posted about that many times, to me it says that I should probably give it a shot. This book is also by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and it is Mexican Gothic. This book is set in 1950s Mexico, and it follows Noemi, who lives in Mexico City and is kind of a bit of a socialite. She receives a strange letter from her cousin, and in that letter, her cousin kind of indicates that things are not all okay in her world. Noemi, being a good cousin, leaves Mexico City and heads out to the countryside to kind of check out what's going on with her cousin. And there she meets her cousin's new husband, who is very European and very off-putting. Noemi immediately suspects that something is wrong with him and his family. But she stays because she's concerned about her cousin. She's also prevented from seeing her cousin and is told that she's going through like some kind of special medical treatments, from what I understand. And as she stays, she starts to have nightmares. Her nightmares start to kind of fuse with reality, and we get what's a really gripping Gothic kind of psychological horror. I have heard nothing but good reviews about this. I have been told that it could be a little bit slow at the start, but that it really picks up and makes for a very interesting book. I'm really looking forward to reading this. As I said with the previous book, I love Mexico very much, so any books that are set in Mexico are very exciting for me. And I'm really curious about learning a bit more about the 1950s in Mexico specifically. And if you thought we were done with Silvia Moreno Garcia, you were wrong. Book 5 on my list is also by her, and that is Certain Dark Things. This book was another one that I saw the beautiful cover of. If you can see it, it is like super bright. There's lots of symbols. And I picked it up not realizing who it was by, what it was about, just thought it was really cool looking, read the back. And this one differs from the previous two in that it is set in a futuristic version of Mexico City, where the other two are anchored more in the past. This book features Domingo, who is a young man working as a trash collector, and he runs into a vampiress named Adel. Adel is in trouble and she has to get out of Mexico City immediately because she is being chased by other vampires. She doesn't plan on bringing a human with her, but her and Domingo kind of hit it off, and so she drags him along on her adventure. This kind of, to me, almost has like a punkish looking vibe, and I'm really honestly quite interested to see how her futuristic writing differs from her writing from previous generations. So I'm really looking forward to this one quite a bit. I also have traveled to Mexico City several times, so I'm really curious to see how her version of a futuristic Mexico City is similar or different to current Mexico City. So this will be the last of the Silvia Moreno Garcia books on this list, but definitely not the last one that I'll ever read. The next book on my list is a book by an author that I've been wanting to read for a really long time. This particular author has 3 books out that I'm aware of, all of them kind of in that dark horror genre. This particular book is in the Gothic horror area, and that book is Sorrowland by River Solomon. This book follows a character named Vern as she flees from a cult. She is heavily pregnant when she's fleeing, and as she gets into the woods where she'll be hiding from them, she does end up giving birth to a set of twins. She decides to raise the twins within the forest and for the first few years of their life, and as she's doing so, she starts to go through some unsettling changes. In order to understand what's happening to her, she kind of has to delve into the history of the land that she's on and the history of the cult that she's been fleeing. This book does feature some LGBT relationships and characters who deal with albinism, so there's some really great representation. And I do want to give a little bit of a warning. This book does have some really dark themes. It does talk about racism, brutality towards African Americans, and even goes into medical experimentation. So if those are sensitive topics for you, please consider that when you pick up this book, or maybe skip it if it's going to be too, emotionally distressful for you. Next up is a book that was actually written by a team. It's a husband and wife team, and they write under the name Ambrose Perry. The book is called The Way of All Flesh, and this is set in Victorian-era Edinburgh, Scotland. The book features a character named Will Raven, who is a recent medical student. He is setting up for an internship with Dr. Simpson, who is a very well-renowned obstetric surgeon and doctor. Dr. Simpson is experimenting with using chloroform as a sedative for his obstetric procedures. He's finding, that it works really well when women are in distressed labor to give them a little bit of chloroform just to kind of sedate them. But they're also finding out that if you don't use it very carefully, you can actually accidentally kill your clients. It's really interesting seeing, that part of the story and how these medical procedures are developed. And then there's a secondary plot line where some of the sex workers of Edinburgh are showing up murdered, apparently from botched obstetric surgery. Will takes a particular interest in this after a sex worker that he used to visit is found dead, and he starts investigating what's going on, and they kind of, the two plot lines weave in and out of each other until the end. Sounds like a really, really interesting book to me. It is very detailed in some of the obstetric procedures. It can be pretty gruesome and graphic. So if you're a little bit squeamish, you don't like reading about surgical procedures, this might not be the book for you. It is a little dry in places, and I've heard that it can get pretty heavy on some of the medical terminology. But if you like Victorian era and you like reading about medical history, this could be a really good book for you. The 8th book on my list is a book that I happened to see on display at my local bookshop, the Writer's Block, and it looked really pretty and sounded really interesting, so I brought it home, not really aware that it was a popular book at all. And then as I kind of started to get into book social media, I realized that this has been one of the books that's been blowing up this year. That is All the Murmuring Bones by V.G. Slater. This book sounds fascinating. It follows the O'Malley family, and for many generations they've had good luck. Townfolk are kind of suspicious of their good luck, in fact, because it's so good. But the recent generations have not had the best of luck. And Grandma O'Malley basically is dead set on changing that luck. In order to do so, she actually basically auctions off her granddaughter, Mirren. And Mirren decides that she wants no part in this. She wants to make her own destiny, decide, for herself what her life is going to be. So she sets off to do just that. This book does involve merpeople and other fantastical creatures. In this case, they're not friendly, happy creatures. They're more like the dark Greek mythology sort of merpeople. This book sounds super interesting. I will say that it does deal with some heavy topics. There's some discussion of incest, blood purity, things like that, again, could be triggering for certain readers. So do keep that in mind if it's something you decide to read for yourself. I personally am super, super excited about all of the tie-ins to the mystical, merpeople, and I'm curious about this generational good luck and how it resolves itself. I'll be reading this shortly and posting a review on Instagram eventually. The next book on my list is the only book that is solidly young adult fiction, and that is the book The Project by Courtney Summers. This book is similar to her other books in that it features a very strong female character. The main character in this book is named Lo, and Lo is living on her own after a tragic car accident that left her in a coma and killed both of her parents. While she was in the coma, her older sister Bea disappears into a cult called the Unity Project. And Lo has had no contact with her since she's woken up from her coma. Lo does take on a job working for a journalist. She's a secretary for this journalist. And during her time at this office, she comes into contact with a parent whose child committed suicide after joining the Unity Project. And that kind of sends her on this spiral, investigating the Unity Project and trying to rescue her sister Bea from the cult. It sounds like a really interesting book. It is young adult, so it is, I guess, written for people that are younger. However, I would put some warnings on this because it deals with cults and suicide, violence, etc. So I wouldn't go super young, maybe 16. I guess it's kind of dependent on the emotional maturity of the young person reading this. I have read some of Courtney Summers' other books, so I'm really looking forward to reading this one. Book number 10 on my list is a book that at the time I didn't realize was very popular, but now I do realize it's quite popular. I initially picked it up because of the beautiful cover, and it turns out that the day that I bought this was the day that it was actually first put on the shelves. And that book is The Inheritance of Orquidea Divina. This story follows the Montoya family after the death of the matriarch Orquidea. The family starts exploring their inheritance and some weird things start happening. So the grandchildren head off to Ecuador and start to investigate what is going on, who their grandmother was, some of the mysticism that's like involved in their grandmother's legacy. And the story is told in dual timelines. There is a plotline that follows the grandmother in the past and a plotline that follows one of the grandchildren in the future. Those two storylines kind of weave in and out of each other to create a really magical tale. From what I understand, this was based off of a short story that Zoraida Cordova had written in the past, and this kind of explores it in further detail. I have heard nothing but good things about this. Everybody that has reviewed it so far has said it's very magical, lovely, that the mystical elements of the book are really well done. I actually spent 3 months in Ecuador, so I'm personally super excited to get to revisit one of my favorite countries again in a book. I am really missing travel, so you'll notice that my book list is very travel heavy. The next book on my list is a book by an author who is wildly popular right now. Every reading list that I look at practically has one of her books on there. This particular book is her first foray into adult fiction. It's a departure from her usual YA sort of a genre. It is a dark academia, which is not necessarily the thing that I gravitate towards the most in the horror genre, but I am trying to read more of, just because there's so many great dark academia books out there right now. The book that I am talking about in this case is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This book follows Galaxy, or Alex, and Galaxy is a broke high school dropout who is raised by a hippie mother in California. She's visited in the hospital and given kind of a second chance at life. She's offered admittance to Yale, and when she gets to Yale, she realizes that some of the clubs there, like Skull and Bones, are kind of fronts for like magical organizations. And from what I understand, she has some magical abilities herself that are seen as very desirable within the school. And that's why she's been allowed this second chance. I don't know a whole lot about this book, but I've read a lot of really good reviews. Occasionally there's one or two that don't really care for it, but for the most part, it seems to be overwhelmingly positive, and I really look forward to kind of delving into this book and seeing what Leigh Bardugo is all about. Okay, book number 12 on my list is a book that my mom actually read and really loved. And my mom and I have pretty similar tastes in reading for the most part, so if she loves a book, generally I'm pretty safe to guess that I'm gonna love the book too. That book is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This book features a female character named Emmanuelle, who is born of kind of a controversial birth. Her mother is the daughter of an apostle, and her father is a dark-skinned overskirter. This is apparently a controversy. She is actually looked down upon because of the color of her skin throughout the book. And when she goes into the woods, she has a chance encounter with some witches, and these witches give her her mother's diary. And this diary kind of leads her to start questioning the world around her and the institution that has kind of created the divisions and things that exist in this world. This book has been compared to Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale, and for me, I don't know if I can think of a higher compliment for a book. Handmaid's Tale is like the start of the dystopian world. I mean, it's like what many other dystopian books have based their dystopias on. And so for me, hearing a book being compared to The Handmaid's Tale is a strong indicator that I should pick it up. This book does deal with colorism, racism, classism. It has some violence and sacrifices and things like that. So those are some difficult themes. If those are themes that, you might have a hard time with, maybe consider that before reading. But I've heard really good things about this and I can't wait to delve into it myself. The next book on my list looks to be probably one of the more emotionally impactful books on the list. It is a horror psychological thriller that kind of deals a bit with mental illness, and that book is called Ill Will by Dan Chaon. This book is about a character named Dustin, who is a psychologist in Cleveland. He is a single father after he's been widowed, and he has a adopted brother who is currently in prison for murdering both their parents, their aunt, and their uncle. After 27 years in prison, he's going to be released because DNA evidence has overturned his conviction. And Dustin's kind of sketched out about that because part of what got him convicted was his own testimony. He testified that his adopted brother had been taking part in some satanic rituals and that he had killed some cats as sacrifices and things like that. So he's stressed out about his brother's impending release, the issues, being a single father, and then the stressors of his job, the demands of being a psychologist. Kind of all of that weaves into a psychologically tumultuous story that deals, like I said, with some mental illness. I've heard that this is a bit dark. It can be a little bit disturbing. So again, if you have some issues reading about mental disorder, be careful when you pick this one. And finally, we're to the last book on my list. I know it's a really big stack of books. This book is another one that I've been seeing around quite a bit on social media. This might not be my usual pickup. Again, it has kind of the dark academia vibes, which, like I said before, I'm just kind of starting to get into the dark academia. It deals with a character named Felicity who is grieving the loss of her girlfriend and has been away from school for a year. So she decides to return to school so that she can graduate, but she's really haunted by the memories of her girlfriend. And she's also haunted by the ghosts of 5 witches who were murdered on the school site or executed on the school site. She promises herself she's going to stay away from all the supernatural, spooky stuff. But when a first-year student asks her for help researching these Dalloway 5, she's kind of drawn in, and that starts the plot. That book, of course, is A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Leigh. This is another really pretty cover. The jacket is just lovely. I've been hearing really good things about this on social media. I will be honest, for me, the description, the summary, just wouldn't be something I would naturally gravitate, but because so many people have loved this, I feel like I have to give it a chance myself. So I'm excited to read it and see if it changes my mind. I want to like it. I'm hopeful that this is going to change my mind about dark academia. So we finally reached the end of my massive reading list. 14 books, some really popular, some, a little less popular, but all of them look to be excellent and I can't wait to get started. I'll be reading these all throughout the month of October and I'll be posting reviews on my Instagram and some of them on YouTube as well. If you liked this video, you found it helpful, there's a book that you want to check out, consider hitting that like button. I'd love to hear your feedback. And if there's any books that you're particularly interested in, maybe something you hadn't heard of before, let me know in the comments below and let me know if you're going to read it too. And if you want more book related content, if you find me interesting, consider giving me a subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're always aware of when my posts go up. I will be aiming to post every Tuesday and Thursday, all sorts of different book related content. We'll be doing reviews, book hauls, book shopping trips, festive book topics, things like that. So I look forward to seeing you again in future videos. Again, I'm Caitlin and this is Bandy's Books. Thank you so much for joining me.